This is now the third straight year in the month of November I'm talking about a player who quit on his team. Back in 2023, MJ Morris opted out of the rest of the season for NC State after he thought he could get a big transfer portal offer. He not only flamed out at Maryland, but also is now at Coastal Carolina. Things didn't work out for him. Last year we saw it twice, with first being Matthew Sluka from UNLV, and then secondly Tommy Castellanos at Boston College. In 2025, we finally got our first quarterback who quit on the team, and that'll be Miami, Ohio quarterback DeQuan Finn. He decided to end his season to focus on the NFL, and this doesn't quite add up. Not only did Miami of Ohio still have meaningful football to play, but DeQuan Finn's draft stock is currently dead in the water and at the lowest it has ever been in his career. What's interesting is that he was actually a super talented player, as he has over 11,000 all-purpose yards in his career, is one of the best quarterbacks in MAC football history, and at one time did seem like a future NFL draft prospect. As of right now, based on the information we have been given, DeQuan Finn has decided to quit on the team and opt out of the rest of the season to focus on the NFL. In today's video, I want to do a deep dive into DeQuan Finn, talk about his career, how he ended up becoming a star at multiple schools, and what the heck just happened to him at Miami of Ohio. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about what happened to DeQuan Finn. So in order to understand how Finn got to this point, we first need to go back in time. He ended up growing up in Detroit, Michigan, and football was in his cradle when he was a baby, as his father played tackle at Wisconsin, and his mom had him working on 3- and 5-step dropbacks in the backyard. Finn said, quote, "It just comes from my background." It would be nice to say that Finn was an immediate prodigy the moment he stepped onto the football field when he was 5 years old, but that would not be the case. He ended up playing center and linebacker as a member of the Southfield Ravens, and Finn felt he lost a bit in his first year playing. He said, quote, "I didn't know what I was doing," with a grin. "I was just out there playing." Still, Finn loved playing enough that he stuck with football. In his second season, Finn found his first opportunity to play quarterback, and that set him on the path he is today. Finn said, quote, "They had seen I could throw the ball for real, and was like, oh my goodness, he's nice. They just put me in at quarterback ever since." For Finn, that began a lifelong love of the quarterback spot. Since middle school, Finn had dreamed of playing quarterback at the college level, and thanks to his wide range of abilities, he did not go unnoticed on the recruiting trail. When Finn was just a freshman in the fall of 2015, Martin Luther King High School experienced one of its greatest seasons ever with Armani Posey as the quarterback. They went 14-0 and won a state championship on a thrilling last-second Hail Mary over Lowell. King at that point had won its second state title in program history. When Posey graduated after that season, it was Finn's turn to take over the reins in 2016, despite only being a sophomore. If anyone could feel expectations heading into that season, it was DeQuan. He said, quote, "We're used to winning, and we don't accept losing. That's not in our vocabulary, and we don't accept losing by any means necessary. Being at King, it's a high standard for every player, and just being able to be a playmaker and giving it your all." In fact, after his first season of starting at a high level of high school football, Finn received his first offer from Arkansas State. He said, quote, "I almost cried when I got my first offer. Somebody's giving me a chance and giving me an opportunity. That's all I ask for is the opportunity, and I'm going to make the most of it." More schools ended up coming calling, and Central Michigan began to recruit him pretty hard. Along the way, he built strong relationships with the Central Michigan staff, and by the time Finn's birthday rolled around, he was already committed to the Chippewas. He said, quote, "I felt as though Central Michigan was the school for me because I felt at home there. I felt as though I fit in their system, and they loved me back." At the time, he played alongside star running back Penny Boone, but 4-star Boone was headed to Maryland, so their paths would not be the same. As a senior, Finn was named the 2018-19 Gatorade Michigan Football Player of the Year, as he threw for 2,100 yards and 25 touchdowns, and also ran for nearly 1,300 yards and 21 scores. They ended up winning 41-25, and they ended up getting a state championship. Things would end up changing though, as Central Michigan would fire their head coach, and he decommitted and opened things back up. Toledo, which is where Finn attended his first high school football camp, ended up offering him. He developed a solid relationship with Rockets head coach Jason Candle. Though he began drawing interest from Power 5 programs, Finn felt Toledo cared about him more than other schools. In fact, while several schools focus on X's and O's, Candle emphasized developing him as a person. He said, quote, "They run a run-pass option at Toledo, so that will suit my style." At the last minute, he got some bigger offers though, as Cincinnati came and offered him last minute, but with his familiarity with Toledo and the fact he had already established a relationship, he was not going anywhere. According to 24/7 Sports, DeQuan Finn was a 3-star recruit, the number 27 dual-threat quarterback, and the 1,137th best player in the class of 2019. So how'd he end up doing at Toledo? Toledo has been one of the better Group of 5 programs over the last few years and has produced plenty of big-time coaches like Gary Pinkel, Matt Campbell, and even Jason Campbell himself. They've also had some decent quarterbacks, most notably Logan Woodside, and then big-time players like Kareem Hunt, Deontay Johnson, and most recently Quinyon Mitchell. Finn ultimately was on that same trajectory, as during his freshman season, he would get on the field a little bit, going 6 of 12 for 86 yards. He did fail to score a touchdown or an interception, and things wouldn't really change in 2020. Due to everything going on in the world, Finn ended up going 0 of 1. I'm pretty sure he redshirted. 2021, though, is when things finally started to fall into place for him, as he was now on his 3rd year on campus, and in total, he threw for 2,000 yards with 18 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He's also a threat on the ground with his legs, as he ran the ball for over 500 yards and 9 touchdowns. Remember people giving him some hype in 2021? As he finished out the season strong with 4 touchdowns in a win over Akron and 3 touchdowns in their Bahamas Bowl game against Middle Tennessee. 2022 is when Finn ended up becoming somewhat of a national name, as after his first 2 games, he would go on the road and play against Ohio State. He apparently dazzled everybody with his potential and athleticism, and he actually ended up having 3 touchdowns against the Buckeyes. While he lost 77-21, DeQuan Finn had a good game. From there, he'd continue on, as he had an insane stretch where he had 12 touchdowns without a single turnover in their next 3 matchups. Ultimately, he'd have a couple of bad games though, like 4 interceptions against Buffalo, and then 2 picks against Western Michigan, but they would make the MAC championship game, where they would beat Ohio, and then they would beat Liberty in the Boca Raton Bowl. In total, Finn threw for 2,200 yards with 23 touchdowns, and this time had 631 yards and 9 touchdowns. Finn probably could have entered the portal and found a bigger school, but he decided he wanted to come back. He then would have his best season in a Rockets uniform, as in 2023, he'd almost helped them upset Illinois on the road with 3 touchdowns, and then would help them win their next 11 games. Yes, Toledo ended up becoming one of the best teams in college football in 2023, at least record-wise, and didn't really have, I'd say, any extraordinary performances, but was remarkably consistent throughout the whole year. He led them to the MAC championship game, where they would play against Miami of Ohio, and unfortunately, they would lose. In total, Finn completed 63% of his passes, threw for 2,700 yards, had 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and also ran for 500 yards and 7 scores on the ground. Finn had now been a 3-year starter who was both great through the air and on the ground, had now represented them in a couple of MAC championship games, and made them one of the best Group of 5 schools in the country. In total, he had over 7,000 passing yards, which was the 5th most in Toledo history, and also had 1,800 rushing yards with 25 touchdowns, and that was the most in program history by a full-time quarterback. By all measures, this guy was sort of historic, and one of the best players to ever step foot on Toledo's football campus. There's a small chance he could have gone off to the NFL and been a late-round pick, but most likely he would have been an undrafted free agent. Despite his loyalty to Toledo, everyone knew it was probably time for him to go. He decided to enter the 2024 transfer portal, and this was supposed to be his final season. He was considered a top 10 quarterback by some, but I believe finished at 11th on other sites, and some saw him as a potential NFL draft pick, but most people saw him as a solid starter at probably the Power 4 level, and many wanted to see what his full potential could be. So where would he go? Well, after entertaining a couple of schools, Finn would end up joining the Baylor Bears in the Big 12. They had just seen their quarterback Blake Shapen transfer over to Mississippi State, and the staff was looking for a replacement at the position and now had an experienced signal caller in DeQuan Finn. In fact, one of the reasons he ended up at Baylor is because he felt the program's culture under head coach Dave Aranda was similar to the one he had experienced at Toledo under Rockets head coach Jason Candle. He said, quote, "It was the same principles that were at Toledo, treating me as a person first more than a player." Finn would ultimately battle it out with Sawyer Robinson, a former Mississippi State transfer, and they were locked in a fierce battle for the starting spot. This began in the spring and would continue in the fall, but Dave Aranda would eventually name DeQuan Finn the starter, and nobody was super shocked by this. Sadly, the season ended up not going according to plan at all, and for being one of the top transfers in the country, he just dropped off the face of the earth. In his first game against Tarleton State, he'd end up having 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, which was honestly kind of worrisome as it came against bad competition. Things would not get any better the next week as they ended up losing to Utah, and then he was done for the year. He had 1 touchdown in garbage duty against Texas Tech, but Sawyer Robertson had ended up taking over because Finn had gotten hurt. I'm not really quite sure what happened, but he applied for a medical waiver and ended up actually getting another year of eligibility. Finn would finish the 2024 season with 307 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns, and also had 2 interceptions. Yeah, his time at Baylor was super uneventful. He had a bad game against Tarleton State, then got hurt, and then got replaced. For a guy who was supposed to be one of the top transfers in the country, he didn't do much, but most of it really wasn't his fault. He decided to enter the portal again because he had an extra year of eligibility, and many thought he'd end up at Michigan. Another side note is that Dante Moore was actually the backup quarterback behind him in high school, and he's now obviously at Oregon via UCLA, but some thought he would decide to return home to Michigan. I mean, it's not like the guy was absolutely terrible, or would have been a bad addition, but they'd end up getting Mikey Keene from USC. While there were a lot of rumors about him going to Michigan, that would not end up happening at all. So where would he go then? Well, he actually ended up back in the MAC with a school that's rivals with Toledo, as he's now at Miami of Ohio. The Red Hawks have had Brett Gabbert as their quarterback for seemingly an eternity, and they now have another guy who has spent nearly 7 years in college football, as Finn decided to choose them. He'll be back to the MAC conference where he started his career, and it looks like he'll finish his year there. Yeah, except that last part ended up being nonsense. DeQuan Finn was named the starter for the Red Hawks, and following in the footsteps of Brett Gabbert, he was hoping to have a good season. Unfortunately, things didn't really go according to plan, as he had 2 picks without a touchdown in their Week 1 loss to Wisconsin, and then was not good in their loss to Rutgers. He did have 2 touchdowns in a close loss to UNLV, but Miami of Ohio started out the season 0-3, and this was a disaster. Finn would end up leading them to 4 straight wins though, as they would beat Northern Illinois, Akron, Eastern Michigan, and Western Michigan, and there was some meaningful football left for the Red Hawks. Finn was starting to figure it out a little bit, but then things changed after the Ohio game. After having 2 touchdowns and a loss to the Bobcats, DeQuan Finn decided it was time to be done. According to Adam Rittenberg, yesterday at 2:51 p.m., Miami of Ohio head coach Chuck Martin announced that he was done. He said he appreciated the 11 months DeQuan spent at the program, but we will not see him the rest of the year, quote unquote. He last played on November 4th against Ohio, and Martin said, quote, DeQuan did some awesome things. He's an awesome young man, and we spent a lot of time together. He's got a shot to play at the next level, so he's going to train and get ready to do that. We appreciate what he did for us and wish him the best. If there's one thing we've learned in college football, it's that scouts not only love tape, but they also love to see how a player faces adversity, and they do not like it when a player quits on the team. Other coaching staffs don't like that either. MJ Morris thought he was going to get huge offers out of the portal, but ended up at Maryland and is now at Coastal, and Matthew Sluka is now the backup quarterback at JMU, and that's only because he reunited with his former coach Bob Chesney, who was with him at Holy Cross. Scouts and coaches do not like quitters, so I think there's definitely something more going on here. I am definitely not going to speculate, but for a player who's on his 7th year and has just a couple of games remaining and is a fringe NFL quarterback prospect at best, there is no reason to take the last month off of football, and this is bizarre to me. It's sort of a sad end to his career, as Finn had over 11,000 all-purpose yards and was a lot of fun at Toledo, and I was hoping after the roadblock at Baylor that he would finish his career strong at Miami of Ohio and go down as a legend. Instead, there's all of this, but again, what do I know? I'm not going to speculate, and I'm sure there's more than meets the eye here. But what do you guys think? If you're a Toledo, Baylor, or Miami of Ohio fan, what do you think happened to DeQuan Finn, and what other players should I cover in my next video? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.